require any other research. Okay.
Hello, welcome to Unspooled. Today we are doing our first mailbag episode where we answer any questions we received into our email account or my Twitter account for Unspooled. You sent a question in. Most likely it will be read here today. It may not be answered. It will be read at the least.
Okay.
So we will begin with the easier questions. Lycan Therian asks, are you excited about The Lighthouse, Robert Eggers' follow-up to The Witch, after the news this week? And they helpfully linked us a nice article informing us that The Lighthouse will be shot in native black and white on 35mm black and white stock, which is unheard of nowadays for any film, meaning this will be entirely in black and white, not in color. So is this exciting news? Well, for me, I was very excited for this film, regardless of if it's in black and white or color. Love The Witch. So, but yes, this should be even more interesting now. See what Eggers does next with a black and white project.
Okay. I am not that excited about it. So
Okay.
No.
Well, you didn't watch The Witch, did you?
No, and in black and white, I really have no interest.
Oh, okay.
No.
All right. See, the other very easy question. With the recently announced cancellation of, this comes from very long username, KFBR392 Go for Groobs, asks, with the recently announced cancellation of the show Last Man on Earth, are we excited for the now likely to happen soon MacGruber 2? Again, this is a very simple yes, I would think. The first MacGruber is one of the better comedies of the decade, I believe. It came out this decade. I forget off the top of my head.
2010.
So yes. So one of the better comedies of the decade, one of the funnier movies so far this decade. So yes, if MacGruber 2 is going to happen, yeah, very excited for that. If and when that would be released at some point soon.
I didn't see the first one.
Okay.
Looking at the synopsis and the storyline, it sounds like it might be interesting. But I'm probably not that interested in it.
Okay. Let's see. Dr. Have Hope asks, movies you walked out of the theater on? You have a very simple answer, I believe, don't you?
Yeah, I don't walk out on movies. I've sat through some of the dumbest movies I've ever seen in theaters, and I do not walk out. So I will painfully make it to the end of the movie.
My answer, there's one I walked out on early. Pirates of the Caribbean 3, I left about 20 minutes early from. That is the only one, because it was so stupid. So Pirates of the Caribbean 3 is the lone one for me. Let's see. Any other simple questions here? I think not. So I'll go quickly through some questions submitted that we are not going to answer here today for various reasons. Nerfman2227 asked, what is the worst change of origin story or retconning in a movie? They nominated the web shooters in Spider-Man being turned into a natural part of Spider-Man's hands. This was done in Sam Raimi's trilogy. The Beast from the East asked, the single actor or actress that has played two roles the most different from each other. And that was a bit too much work for us.
Yeah.
to do right now.
We might
without
work on that.
Yeah, that may be a future installment if we care to. Taxi XO asked, dystopian films with cannibalistic themes. I have like two that I can think of, and I'm not even sure if these are dystopian films. Cannibal Holocaust and The Green Inferno might be the only two cannibal films I can really think of that might have dystopian elements to them. Teddy Ruxpin asked, generally hated films you love. Another one that may be a future installment at some point. So we did not use that here. Non Stronzi asked, good period dramas. Another one that may be done at a future time. That will take a bit of work to do. WDW Sim 23 asked, Nicholas Winding Refn, fan or not, favorite and least favorite movies of his. You have no experience, correct, with any of his films?
I'm not a fan.
I've seen two of his works, enjoyed both of them, Neon Demon and Drive, both great films, but haven't seen the rest of his stuff enough to really delve into yet. Donna 2012-99 asked, some great movies that failed due to terrible marketing. This is another one that takes a lot more research than we cared to put into for this episode, and may be done at a future time at some point. So we will now transition into the questions we actually have prepared answers for. Beginning with, I'm going to mispronounce this one. Ingobernable Ace asked, your favorite films from the following franchises. So you have laid out Star Wars. Pretty not as easy of a choice as might be thought, at least for me.
Okay.
It kind of varies on a day-to-day basis at this point between either Empire or Last Jedi for me on Star Wars.
Okay. Mine is Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope.
James Bond.
For James Bond, mine is For Your Eyes Only.
Okay. I'm not a fan of Bond in the slightest. Do not care for these movies. They're all way too stupid for me. But off the top of my head, I'd have to say, I think Skyfall, I think, is the one Roger Deakins DP'd. So it's very pretty to look at. So I'll go with that. The MCU.
I don't really have one for that one.
Okay.
So.
I have to see the resolution, but would be Avengers Infinity War at the moment.
Okay.
If they resolve it in the everyone, spoiler alert here, if they resolve it in the everyone comes back alive territory, then it'll be an interesting discussion. I'd probably have to go Cap Civil War at that point then. But it's between those two for sure. Indiana Jones.
Okay, as you'll see, a lot of mine are the first one in series. So Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark.
I do concur on that one. Lord of the Rings, not including the Hobbit trilogy.
Once again, Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Rings.
I would agree on that
First
front
one.
too, yes. Pirates of the Caribbean.
I don't have one.
The first one, first Black Pearl, to me is still the only good one, so
Okay.
it's kind of by default. Live action only, starting with the Nolan Batman trilogy DC films. So you'd have Batman Begins, Dark Knight Rises, Man of Steel, Suicide Squad, Justice League, and Wonder Woman, I believe, are all of your options.
All those I would go with Wonder Woman.
Well, since Nolan Bat counts, has to be Dark Knight here. Really no argument in my mind for any others. And then Die Hard.
Once again, Die Hard 1.
Again, like Bond franchise, I don't care for really any of, but out of any, I guess I'd have to go with the first, I guess. So, simple enough.
Yes.
Our next question comes to us courtesy of Grave is Not a Food, who asked, great recent horror films from 2010 or newer.
I will leave that one to you.
Very well. I have about 30 or so here, I believe. That's a later category. I picked out 15 here. It Follows is a great one. You're Next. Don't Breathe. Surprisingly enough, the remake of The Evil Dead is very good. Not as good as the original, but still very good nonetheless. Green Room. In this, you get to see Patrick Stewart play a Nazi, which is kind of entertaining for a little bit. The Babadook. The aforementioned The Witch. Just from last year, Get Out is pretty good. The Cabin in the Woods, which is kind of more a deconstruction of the home invasion genre than it is a horror film, but it works as a horror film as well. Absentia, a nice foreign film, I believe. I Am Not a Serial Killer, a little unconventional horror film, but a great one nonetheless. The Strange Color of Your Body's Tears, another great one. And then 3 that have horror elements to them, but aren't fully just straight up horror films. Raw, this is another one from last year. This is about a young woman who develops a taste for human flesh after a science experiment goes wrong a little bit. Or not a science experiment, sorry, a hazing ritual. She develops an affinity for raw, uncooked flesh.
Okay.
Mother, another one from last year, has some horror elements, like the baby getting eaten is a little horror-y, but isn't really a horror film, really, but still very good. And from this year, Annihilation has some horror elements to it, but not enough that I would call it a full-fledged horror film.
No.
So you did not have any, or you thought of any in the last 10 minutes?
Well, I might do the remake of It.
Oh, okay.
And that would be about it.
All right. You could, I guess. Okay. One I was too thrilled with, but that's fine. So our next question comes from Shuffling to Glory, who asks, great films, 90 minutes or shorter. This is the one I have about 34.
Okay.
So would you like to go through yours first? Or?
Yes, I only have 17.
Okay.
Pretty simple. A few animated features. To begin with, The Lion King, Shrek, and Toy Story. And then I have Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, which clocks in at exactly 90 minutes, Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, The Naked Gun 2.5, The Smell of Fear, a TV movie from 1971, Duel, and that one was directed by Steven Spielberg. The Woman in Red, one of the most talked about movies of all time, Plan 9 from Outer Space. I have Silent Running, The Ghost and Mr. Chicken, Viva Las Vegas, an Elvis flick. Another TV movie that's a Sad Brian's song. I have I'm not sure if this is the original, but it's an old one, The Mummy from 1959, Haunted Honeymoon, and last but not least, Airplane from 1980.
I have 30 selections for this category. I have two animated films, The Nightmare Before Christmas and the silent film, The Red Turtle. Both great, animated, under 90 minutes. Some, obviously, live-action stuff. A short film about killing is a very good one. Aguirre, The Wrath of God. Army of Darkness, the third Evil Dead film. Beetlejuice. Bronson, Nicholas Winding Refn film there. Dogtooth, Yorgos Lanthimos' directorial debut, if you're interested in that. The Dracula, the 1930s version. Enemy, great one, very, very weird movie, but a great one. The 30s Frankenstein as well. The original Japanese anime version of Ghost in the Shell. The original Halloween. If you're interested in a documentary, Jodorowsky's Dune, which details the production issues that plagued Jodorowsky's adaptation of Dune, which then ended up never being made. Very interesting documentary.
Okay.
The first two films in the Mad Max series both qualify for this. Speaking of some silent films, Modern Times, Charlie Chaplin film. Monty Python and the Holy Grail. A silent 1920s horror film, Nosferatu. Paths of Glory. Phone Booth, one of the best films set in one location. Pi. Primer, only 90 minutes, but it will feel like about 5 hours. Very slow, very complex, weird film, but wonderful.
Okay, great recommendation.
Yes. Raising Arizona. Show Me Love, or if you're not from the United States, you know this film as Fucking a Mall is the title outside of the United States. THX 1138. Thank You for Smoking, great dark comedy. Another silent horror, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. The original Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Woohoo.
The original version of The Wicker Man. And Videodrome. You want a Cronenberg film for you here in 90 minutes. So all great films, 90 minutes or shorter there. Our next question comes from Tamanu, who asks, Japanese cinema recommendations. You have anything for this?
No, I will leave that to you.
All right. So I have a few here. Most of the Godzilla and Gamera films, of course, if you're into fun, silly kaiju. Most of Studio Ghibli's work, if you're into animated stuff. Then some specific films. Hausu, Seven Samurai, 13 Assassins, Love Exposure. This is like a 4-hour-long comedy. Very, very good. All About Lily Chow Chow. The, of course, seminal Rashomon. Audition, a very weird, abstract Japanese horror film, but very wonderful. Sword of Doom. Tampopo. The Hidden Fortress. Akiru. And then two more on the fun, silly side. Suicide Circle. And Why Don't You Play in Hell? All some very good Japanese films if you're looking for that.
Huh. Well, my parents always wanted me to play in Traffic. They never wanted me to play in the other place there. Okay.
Dr. Horrible 10 asks, horror films that are visually stunning or have abstract endings? Is this another one you're leaving for me?
Another horror
All right.
List is for you, yeah.
Okay, well, then you're not going to be doing anything for a little bit.
Horror's not my forte.
On the abstract ending side, the obvious choices would be like The Shining, the Kubrick version, not the Stephen King approved version. Personal Shopper if you want to call that a horror film, would kind of work here. That's about it as far as I could come up with off the top of my head. So I just went the visually stunning route. The Mask from 1961, not the Jim Carrey comedy. This is a very different film called The Mask.
That's good.
Very good, very visually impressive. Most of David Lynch's filmography, if you want to count it as horror, would fit in this category. He's always very visually impressive. The horror part's the debatable issue, but some of his stuff would fit. Not all of it, if you ask me, though. Planet of the Vampires is a very good one. Beyond the Black Rainbow, one I mentioned previously, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, is a very visually impressive film. And then a recent addition here, Cult of Chucky, from last year, was very visually impressive, very interesting. The way it's shot, very, very beautiful film. That was all I could come up with for this off the top of my head here, pretty much. So then our next question comes from Corbinkrami, I believe, who asks, favorite horror directors? So I'm assuming you have nothing here.
That is correct.
All right. John Carpenter is great. Halloween, other stuff that I'm blanking on at the moment. The Thing, The Fog, all very good stuff. Wes Craven, of course. Not Nightmare. Did the other one, right?
Freddy.
No, he did Nightmare. Okay.
Nightmare on Elm Street.
I'm getting myself confused here when I don't have my notes pulled up with telling me what people did. George A. Romero, of course, Night of the Living Dead is the famous one, but he did a lot of other great horror films. Sam Raimi's horror work, the Evil Dead trilogy, as well as Drag Me to Hell, also very good horror films. Of course, David Cronenberg with Videodrome, Scanners, all very good. And he even does very good crime dramas later in his career, which are very good. They're not horror films, but they're also very good, like History of Violence or Cosmopolis. Very good stuff, but not horror in the slightest, really. If you want some foreign films, Dario Argento, one of the best Italian horror directors. Very good. Guillermo del Toro, his horror work is, as everything else he does, fantastic, of course. Kronos, Devil's Backbone, really Mimic, also very good stuff. Robert Wise, I need to pull that up or I'm never going to remember what he's done off the top of my head.
Okay.
Let me get there. So Robert Wise, The Haunting is probably his most noteworthy horror film. He's done other stuff, The Body Snatcher, The Curse of the Cat People, Blood on the Moon's a Western, but is very good. Audrey Rose, all very good horror films. He's most known for his non-horror work, such as The Sound of Music or West Side Story, The Day the Earth Stood Still, worked on the first Star Trek film, the Andromeda Strain as well. So he's mostly known for his non-horror work, but his horror work is pretty good nonetheless. Then we'll end with two terrific gay horror directors, James Whale, who did the 1930s Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, Invisible Man, Old Dark House, Man in the Iron Mask, The Green Hell, one of his less saluted films that he worked on. So all very good horror films, and shot in the dark selection here a little bit. Clive Barker, his directorial outings: first Hellraiser, Candyman, Lord of Illusions, Nightbreed. Very, very good horror films. Then some who I just started getting through. or they did too little horror throughout their careers for me to really put up here. Alfred Hitchcock, Stanley Kubrick's in this category. James Wan, I'm just starting to really work through some of his stuff. Tobe Hooper, William Peter Blatty, he did The Exorcist, is the notable one of his. Brian De Palma, he's in the did too little category. Mario Bava, another great foreign one. David Lynch, I'm working on getting through some of the less known stuff, and I don't consider most of his stuff horror. So then they didn't do enough good stuff. Rob Zombie, M. Night Shyamalan, and Eli Roth for horror, at least. So you come up with anything for this? I'm guessing not.
No.
Okay. So let's move to one you can do that I will not contribute to.
Uh-oh, really?
Buff Burger asks a two-parter. You can handle the first part. I'll handle the second part if you'd like.
Okay.
Favorite films with a strong female lead, and favorite films written or directed by women.
Okay.
So you can take the lead part, since I already have none off the top of my head here.
Here's some that I found. Contact stars Jodie Foster. Contacts aliens actually contact us. Laura Croft, Tomb Raider. Aeon Flux. G.I. Jane. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Mamma Mia, with the sequel coming out this year. The Blind Side. Starring a lot of women in this one, A League of Their Own. An oldie, but a really good one, Fargo. One we just watched, I, Tonya. Also from these later ones here are real recent. 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. Hidden Figures. Happy Death Day. The Shape of Water. Wonder Woman. And last but not least on my list, Atomic Blonde.
One you did not mention, Alien. The first 3 Aliens,
yes,
really, would fit. Actually, Prometheus and Alien Covenant work too. I'm not as familiar with Alien Resurrection, so I'm not willing to say one way or the other on that one. But Alien, Prometheus, Covenant, and then 1, 2, and 3 all would fit in that category.
Yes.
That's my contribution.
Okay.
So, favorite films written or directed by women. You have anything for this?
Yes, I have a few.
Nice. Okay.
I start with one I just mentioned, A League of Their Own, directed by Penny Marshall. Big, also directed by Penny Marshall. Frozen. Jennifer Lee was a co-director. Then Nora Ephron directed 2 of these, Sleepless in Seattle and You've Got Mail. Almost technically the same movie, but, a little bit different there. Elizabeth Banks with Pitch Perfect 2. I'm going to mispronounce this lady's name. I'm sorry, but Philidia Lloyd. She did Mamma Mia. Susan Settleman with Desperately Seeking Susan. Amy Heckerling did 2 of my favorite movies, Fast Times at Ridgemont High and the National Lampoon's European Vacation. And Betty Thomas, who did Dr. Dolittle, Private Parts, the Brady Bunch movie, among other films that are good. That is my female directors.
I must have taken most of the good ones from you, huh?
Yes.
So pretty much the entirety of Sofia Coppola's filmography is terrific. Whether it be Virgin Suicides, Lost in Translation, Marie Antoinette, Somewhere, The Bling Rings, the one I don't like much, and The Beguiled, for a person who wanted period pieces. Beguiled, there you go. It's a great one from last year. Strange Days, a weird sci-fi noir from Catherine Bigelow. great one. The Beaver from Jodie Foster. American Psycho from Mary Harron, a very deeply unsettling film with Christian Bale, with one of his many great performances. One of your favorites here, Clueless from Amy Heckerling.
Yes.
Wayne's World, another great comedy from Penelope Spheeris. Kung Fu Panda 2 and 3 from Jennifer Yu Nelson. She solo directed the second 3 Code with Alessandro Carleone, but, nonetheless, technically counts. Now and Then from Leslie Lincoln Glatter. And for any comic book people, Punisher Warzone from Lexi Alexander. This is a very, very violent but super fun film. So if you're into that, definitely check out Punisher Warzone. Our next question comes from Sea Caves 0127, who asks, favorite dark or messed up films?
I don't have any of those.
You have nothing for this.
No.
All right. One of my favorites from last year, Phantom Thread, a very, very dark film about the love between an abusive man and a woman who enjoys poisoning people so she can take care of them. It's very, very wonderful, very emotionally moving, but deeply disturbing when you think about it. The Age of Innocence, this is a Scorsese film, and this is one of Scorsese's few that does not feature any violence in any way whatsoever. No one gets punched, no one gets shot, nothing. It's just so tonally bleak, so bleak. Compliance, another great one. In the Company of Men, great. If you're into animated films that leave you depressed, Grave of the Fireflies is about the fallout of the nuclear bombing of Japan, is told through the eyes of an orphaned child as a result of the bombings. Very sad film, very wonderful nonetheless. Whiplash is a film on the surface about a person who wants to become a successful jazz drummer, but is about a whole lot more than that. Manchester by the Sea, another recent one, terrific one, very depressing. From last year, another very depressing one, A Ghost Story. This is in our best of the year list. I think I refer to this film as the movie where Casey Affleck stands around in a sheet for an hour and a half. That is what this movie is. Casey Affleck stands on a white sheet for an hour and a half and says nothing. But this film is a very, very deeply sad film about memory, about loss, about love, and about what happens when we die and will we be remembered or not. Very, very sad film. Donnie Darko, a film essentially about the fact that no matter what we do, we're all going to die and the world's going to end. And The Hunt is another great one. Then this could count. I think you could make an argument this would count in this category. 2001, A Space Odyssey. You could count in this category, I believe. All very, very great films. Very, very dark, depressing films, if you're into that. Our next question comes to us from multiple people asked this one. The first two I received were from the first Bromigo and Ingobernable Ace, getting in 2 questions today. They asked what our variants on our anticipated films for the rest of the year. They wanted specific numbers, some like top 20 for the rest of the year, top 5 for the rest of the year. That will be a separate show. After our best of the year so far list, it will be a separate show where we'll look at what we're looking forward to the rest of the year. But that show's not till the end of June. So we're going to do what we're looking forward to in June. So would you care to start?
I don't have any.
You're not looking forward to anything coming out in June.
I did not do that. So
Okay.
while you're doing yours, I'll look at the June movies.
All right. Very well then. So let me pull up my notes here on these before I start babbling on about a plot that does not exist.
Okay.
As I have been wont to do before.
Never stop me.
Thank you. So I am on the wrong movie. Unless the movie I'm looking for has been in development since 2009, but I don't think that's...
Some of them could be.
I don't think that's the one I want.
Okay.
So let me try to find what I want here.
Okay.
Have you found anything yet?
Yes.
Okay. What would you like to bring up for us here?
I'm not going to go into great details on these, but
okay.
I see Ocean's 8 with, obviously that's a lot of women in that one. Sandra Bullock, Kate Blanchett, etc. Kind of a take on Ocean's 11, etc. Next on my list would be, I'm not really sure I want to see this one, but it's a documentary, Won't You Be My Neighbor? About
Mr. Rogers.
Mr. Rogers, yes. And it says it's Fred Rogers. So, I couldn't think of Mr. Rogers. Wow. Incredibles 2. Obviously, the second movie in that franchise. Next is a big one. Jurassic World. Fallen Kingdom. Coming out on June 22nd. Obviously, the sequel to Jurassic World. And for the last one of June that I would be looking forward to would be Uncle Drew. Yes, with Kyrie Irving, Shaquille O'Neal, Reggie Miller, etc. Lots of basketball players, and at least the previews look funny. And those are probably the only funny parts around, but in the whole movie. But those would be my June anticipated ones.
Right. I have 12 films from June that I'm looking forward to. The first coming out June 1st, Breath, which is an adaptation of the Australian novel of the same name. The film is set in the 1970s with two teenage boys forming a connection with an older surfer. The boys, Piglet and Looney, have grown up in a small town and through surfing meet up with Sando, who challenges them to take greater and more dangerous risks. I think this could be an interesting coming-of-age film here, potentially. On the 8th, from everyone I've talked to who saw it at Sundance, what is going to be one of the best horror films of the year, Hereditary. When Ellen, the matriarch of the Graham family, passes away, her daughter's family begins to unravel cryptic and increasingly terrifying secrets about their ancestry. Looks like it's going to be very, very great. So I am looking forward to this one. So we'll see how it goes. But from what I've heard, one of the best horror films of the year so far. Then one you talked about already, Ocean's 8. I'm looking forward to that one a bit. Then one that just looks so stupid that I hope that it is as stupid as I believe it will be. Hotel Artemis, what appears to be a ripoff of John Wick. Hopefully it goes better than the last one we got of those, Proud Mary from earlier this year. This, in the near future, Jean Thomas is a woman who runs a secret hospital for criminals in Los Angeles called Hotel Artemis. This looks like it could be a lot of dumb, stupid fun. And, sometimes I'm on board for that. Sometimes I'm not. So hopefully This is as dumb, stupid, and fun as I believe it will be.
Well, it's got some good stars.
It does.
Maybe some good stars.
I know.
Hopefully they're actually trying and not just in it for a paycheck.
Well, sometimes that provides great comedy. Sometimes.
Yes.
Have you not seen 90% of John Wayne's acting?
Yes.
Another one you mentioned, Won't You Be My Neighbor? Very excited for that one. The Incredibles 2, another one you mentioned. Very excited there. One you did not bring up for, I believe, obvious reasons. On June 17th, premiered June 17th of last year at the LA Film Fest. We'll be releasing on June 22nd of this year, Izzy Gets the Fuck Across Town, starring Mackenzie Davis, fresh off her role in Tully, or really before Tully, I guess, really, with probably when this was released. No real plot details for this, except she is going to ride a bike across Los Angeles, I believe, to get somewhere. It looked like it could be interesting. So I thought it sounded interesting, so I'm excited for that one. One that has been getting 8 million miles of buzz coming out of Cannes here recently, Under the Silver Lake. This is directed by David Robert Mitchell, with Andrew Garfield, Riley Keegan, and Topher Grace all starring. So you get a Spider-Man re-teaming up of Andrew Garfield and Topher Grace from two separate entities of Spider-Man. You get Amazing Spider-Man, and you get Sam Raimi Spider-Man. Anywho, this is supposed to be a modern neo-noir comedy. So very excited for this. Here is Sam, an affable but aimless young man, becomes an unwitting detective who quickly finds himself in over his head as he investigates the mysterious disappearance of his beautiful neighbor with whom he has fallen in love. Sounds like it could be very, very interesting. Could be a very good film. Looking forward to that one. And I've heard coming out of Cannes, it's supposed to be really good. Another one that I've heard lots of good things about, Boundaries, coming out on the 22nd. This is a road trip film as Laura, along with her teenage son Henry, is forced to drive her pot-dealing father from Portland to her sister's house in LA after he's kicked out of her retirement home. Okay. Sounds like it could be a fun, funny film. On the 29th, Leave No Trace. This is based on the book My Abandonment, written by Peter Rock. This premiered back at Sundance. Here, a father and his 13-year-old daughter are living in an ideal existence in a vast urban park in Portland, Oregon, when a small mistake derails their lives forever. Sounds like it could be very interesting, and from what I've heard coming out of Sundance, very, very great film here. Two more. Another one on the 29th, Woman Walks Ahead. This is the story of Caroline Weldon, a portrait painter from New York who travels to Dakota to paint a portrait of Sitting Bull. This premiered back at TIFF and looks to be a very interesting and moving Western. Very excited for this one. And the last one, a sequel, unfortunately, but nonetheless, to one of the best films from 2015, Sicario. We have Sicario, Day of the Soldado. No, Denis and Roger Deakins aren't coming back for this film. Instead, we get Stefano Salima and Daruz Wolski this time. Not quite the crack team of Denis Villeneuve and Roger Deakins, but oh well. You get Benicio del Toro back, Brolin's back. So this is going to follow the drug war at the U.S.-Mexican border, as it has escalated to the point where the cartels have begun transporting terrorists across the border. Loved the first one, so very excited to see what they pull out for Sicario 2. So very excited for that. So that's what I'm looking forward to in June. Our next question comes to us courtesy of Plow Killer, who asks, great but overlooked films from notable directors. They nominated Danny Boyle's Millions was their selection. Do you have any for this?
No, I do not.
Okay. So I got 11 here. I couldn't narrow it down to 10. Ingmar Bergman is well loved for many reasons, but one of his classics that gets overlooked, The Touch. Similarly, Alfred Hitchcock's Under Capricorn, another overlooked one from him. Francis Ford Coppola with One from the Heart, very, very good one. Roman Polanski with a very interesting horror film, The Tenant, very good. Richard Linklater brought us Waking Life. This, if you're familiar with A Scanner Darkly, which is another Linklater film, that one is animated entirely with rotoscope. This is very similar to that. This came before, so this is kind of his test run, but looks so much more visually impressive. This film is absolutely gorgeous. The story isn't terribly good, but the visuals are stunning in this one. I couldn't narrow it down. So from Denis Villeneuve, I couldn't decide between either Polytechnique or Incendie. So both of them are incredible, as everything else Denis done so far. Then one that gets forgotten, Zack Snyder was good at one point. I promise you he was good about 10 years ago now, but he was good at one point with Watchmen. I recommend the 3.5-hour ultimate cut version for the full experience of the movie. But this is a great comic book adaptation. Snyder was good at those at one point. I know he has not been for 10 years, but he was good. Don't forget that. A overlooked Steven Spielberg, Empire of the Sun. Very, very great historical drama. David Fincher with Panic Room. Very good one. Then Martin Scorsese. There's a few Scorseses I could have gone with here. King of Comedy is slowly getting back around to being properly appreciated for its brilliance, I think. But one that has not yet happened to After Hours, one of his finest. And William Friedkin, who is most known for, Friedkin's most known for his work on, on The Exorcist. He directed The Exorcist. Those, The French Connection, are the known ones. He also did To Live and Die in L.A., which is a very good one. But to me, his finest work was Sorcerer, with a killer score from Tangerine Dream. Killer score. But incredible film on as well. Just the more important bit here that we're answering. So very, very good. Let's see. Pedro Shane has 2 here for us. The first, films that you disliked the first time you watched, but loved the second.
Okay, I don't really have any of those.
Okay, I have a few. Some interesting choices too, maybe. Prometheus, threw me off a bit. Most of these are ones that threw me off a little bit on the first watch. And then I was like, oh, okay, now I know what I'm getting. So, okay, yeah, okay, I get you now. Because I was expecting, you know, a straight up alien movie again. And that's not what Prometheus brought us, but it's still very, very great. Only God Forgives was another one that threw me off. I didn't know what I was getting into. And then about halfway through, I was like, oh, okay. So I don't think I actually watched it all the way through the first time. I was like, oh, now I get where you're going. I'm going to start this over and then actually pay attention now. Then a tie, both of these for similar reasons. Clueless as well as Mean Girls. Very similar films. Both the first time I was like, this is really stupid. What's the point here? Then on the second watch, I was like, oh, I get it. Okay, yeah, these are great. Okay, very great comedies. The Man Who Wasn't There was at the time unlike any other Coen brother films I had ever seen, so it threw me off a lot when I first put in Man Who Wasn't There. I'm like, wait. What, a black and white film noir? What are you doing, Coens? Then, oh, okay. No, I get you now. Then one that kind of fits, but not fully. Star Wars, A New Hope. Initially hated this thing, thought it was atrocious. But after the prequels and Rogue One gave me depth to the characters and the events that were occurring in the first movie, I was like, oh, okay, I get you now. Okay. There's still things about this that are awful, but okay, I get you now a little bit. Now I understand Darth Vader's not just a giant murderous robot who has no personality. Oh, he actually is a character. Wow, that's interesting. So, you know, but nonetheless. So then I inverted this question a few times. Films I liked the first time, but disliked on a rewatch. You have anything for that?
I don't really have anything for that.
Okay. The Sixth Sense. Basically, after you know the twist, the whole movie basically falls apart when you rewatch it because it's like so like this doesn't really work, man. Wonder Woman is in this category. It's okay the first time, but after the first watch, it is so boring. It's easily the best DC studio film, but it's still not very good. Then some films I liked the first time, but loved the second or more times I watched it. Logan was in this camp. I was expecting, like we got every other Wolverine movie, which is just your standard, okay, he's going to run around and kill a bunch of people and okay, whatever. Then once I got about 3/4 of the way through, I was like, oh, this is what you're doing, Mangold. Okay, gotcha. So then rewatched it. Oh, this is incredible. Gotcha. Dark Knight, same thing. Dunkirk was this way. Thoroughly enjoyed it the first time on an artistic level more so than a story level. But then once I think you actually brought it up that it's telling 3 different stories at the same time, non-linearly. Like, oh, okay. So rewatched it, and yeah, it is, and that made me appreciate it even more on more than just a pure artistic level, on a incredible storytelling achievement level as well. The first Deadpool was like this. Just really, when you rewatch it, there are so many more jokes you missed the first time.
Okay.
There's not really any added depth or anything to the story, but there's just so many more jokes you missed the first time. Though I will admit that after you watch Deadpool like 4 or 5 times, that there are bits that start to not work as much. Star Wars The Last Jedi is here as well. Thoroughly enjoyed it first time in the theater. Second time, loved this thing. And the more I watch it, the more I'm like, no, this is really incredible. There are a few things that are weird, but I can smell out this was a studio mandate that this had to happen. Notably, the Leia floating through space scene. Like, every time I see it, I'm like, Disney mandated that. They're like, no, you can't kill Leia off in the first 30 minutes. Rian Johnson, what are you doing? And it's like, oh, maybe we should have let him. Oops. Well, now how are we going to rewrite 9? Oh boy. Not that that was anything they could have predicted, but
Right.
Mad Max Fury Road was like this too. The first time on the DVD of it, not great, but it was still okay. Then rewatching it on Blu-ray, so stunning. Just visually, so stunning. The effects work, the CG work, just so incredible. And then the story worked even better on a rewatch of Mad Max Fury Road. Then a weird category I came on with, films that were ruined by their sequels a little bit. I can only come up with one. The original Blade Runner, I would say, as 2049 was just miles better to me. Like 2049 was still a very dense, complex story, but it gave you hints and clues of, you can figure this out, audience. You're not as stupid as everyone thinks you are, audience. You can figure this one out. First one doesn't really do that. It's kind of just, no, this is what's happening. Do you understand this? No, but we're going to do things, and it's not going to make sense to you, but it's going to happen. That's kind of the first one. 2049 was just so much more of a cohesive and interesting story than the original was, at least to me. But that's just me, maybe.
Okay.
Thick Beard Sanchez asks, what are some of your favorite guilty pleasure movies?
Okay.
To me, I'll introduce this, then you can give your selections here. So to me, a guilty pleasure film is something that's generally a bad film, but it's enjoyable, but the key is that it's not enjoyable due to how awful it is. So, for example, something like Plan 9 from Outer Space or The Room, which are very enjoyable because of how awful they are and that none of the actors can act. The screenwriter had no idea how people talk, apparently. That's one of the fun things with The Room, is that it's like Tommy Wiseau has no idea how human beings talk, apparently. So this is hilarious. That's the key to me. A guilty pleasure is something that isn't fun because of how atrocious it is, but is still fun even though it's atrocious, more so. If that makes any sense.
Kind of.
Okay.
I'm going to do half of my list and then explain and then do the other half.
Okay.
Kind of.
Okay.
So my first half includes the most awesome of all movies, Anaconda from 1997, where an anaconda snake is super huge. Summer Rental, a John Candy comedy from 1985. My next one is Apollo 18 from 2011.
Mm-hmm.
Next is Galaxina from 1980. And to end my first half, I have Congo from 1995. Now I'm going to explain a little bit here. You may say, well, explaining halfway through is kind of weird. But anyway, I had a hard time knowing what a guilty pleasure movie was. So on Ranker, there is a list of the greatest guilty pleasure movies. Mm-hmm. And their rule is, what makes a film a guilty pleasure? This is a movie that you love to watch, but you won't display on your DVD shelf. Or maybe you will stop to watch when you flip by it on TV, but never if someone else is in the room. Well, these movies are not always bad movies per se, but our cultural zeitgeist has determined that they are cheesy movies. Badly done, overdone, overwrought, or made entirely of syrup. whatever that means.
There's no story value. It's all a bunch of dumb action.
Yes. Now,
so by that definition, a perfect example, I think, would be like Terminator 2.
Yeah,
would be a perfect example. An awful movie, but super fun because of how dumb it is.
I'm going to go down and list their top 10. Just their top 10.
Okay.
Roadhouse.
Yep.
Independence Day.
Mm-hmm.
Dirty Dancing.
Mm-hmm.
The Lost Boys.
Not familiar with that.
Grease.
Yeah.
Con Air.
Oh, yeah.
Point Break.
Mm-hmm.
Starship Troopers.
Yeah.
Ghostbusters.
Which one? Bill Murray or
the Bill Murray
McCarthy? Okay.
1984. And last but not least,
that, yeah.
in their top 10 is Armageddon.
Mm-hmm.
Now, honestly, those are not all bad movies.
Most are.
I mean, I looked up Grease on, Metacritic. It has a 70%, 76% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, I'd argue Grease and Ghostbusters are the only ones I wouldn't say that I'm aware of there that aren't bad.
So
all the rest I would easily say are bad movies.
So the rest of my list, they're not bad movies at all.
Except The Lost Boys. I have no idea what that is.
But these are ones I think that when I say I like these, people kind of laugh or like, really? And stuff. But they're good movies. But for some reason, some people just don't. And I know everyone's different. But I'm going to include Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Field of Dreams, Fletch, and last but not least on my list is Paul Blart, Mall Cop. I just love that movie. And Fletch is just so funny. I love that one. Okay, those are my guilty pleasure movies.
I wouldn't really class Ferris Bueller as one that people would be shocked by. I mean, if it's still relevant enough to be parodied by Deadpool in its post-credit scene, I don't really think it counts. But I don't know.
It's one of those movies where I don't know how to say it, but it's in one day he does way too much that he could never ever do in one day of taking school off.
Well, yeah.
There's no way.
Yeah.
Go to a baseball game, a parade, and all this they have a parade and a baseball game, and you went to both in the same day. How?
Yeah, well. So for me, this first section, the easy way to get into my heart with being terrible film is to be a really fun musical and real fun musical numbers. So here are 5 awful musicals, but are still fun because of the musical aspects. Burlesque, terrible film, but Cher and Christina Aguilera are pretty good singers. Grease 2. The songs, I enjoyed the songs, even though about half of them are about sex. They're still pretty entertaining. Sister Act 2 is pretty fun. Xanadu, another awful film, but the song numbers are pretty good. Thanks a lot to Yellow wrote them. That kind of helps.
Yes.
Can't Stop the Music, which is the Village People movie. Yes, there was a time the Village People got a movie.
Way to go.
Terrible movie. None of them can act, but the music numbers are, of course, delightfully silly.
YMCA.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Then some that aren't musicals but are terrible but are still pretty fun. Mortal Kombat. The first, not the sequel, or there was apparently a third one I've heard. The first one is just really, really stupid, but is really fun. Some real fun action scenes. Batman and Robin. If you can stand puns, this is actually pretty great. The puns are legitimately good. That's the only joke, is that they're puns, unfortunately. But if you can stand puns and George Clooney bat nipples, it's a fine film for that, if you're into that kind of material. Silent Hill. This one is not very good, but is kind of fun. And especially if you're a fan of the games, you can kind of fill in the logic gaps this film has. You can kind of fill in, and it almost makes it work as a film, but doesn't really. And then Machete. This one is maybe doesn't count because it is kind of intentionally awful, but oh well. Even if you're intentionally bad, you're still bad.
Okay.
But has some insanely fun and over-the-top action scenes where, like, Machete rips a dude's intestines out and then uses them to, like, rappel down the side of a building. Very silly and stupid, but pretty fun nonetheless. Then some that are great in the so bad that they're good territory of your deriving pleasure from their awfulness. I don't technically count them, but some I'd like to mention, of course, The Room. To me, Anaconda fits here. None of the actors can act, and it's so stupid, but it's entertaining, unintentionally hilarious. One of the best unintentional comedies ever made. Most of these are unintentional comedies, but
yes.
Birdemic, Shock and Terror, absolutely awful, but so hilarious. The Wicker Man, the Nick Cage version. What other movie are you going to get to see Nick Cage sneak around in a bear suit and punch women in the face? What other movie are you going to see that in? Exactly.
None that I know of.
And then Troll 2.
Oh boy.
Yes. So great. Our final question comes from Pedro Shane, who asks, best director of the last 20 years. They nominated Christopher Nolan, as their reasoning is that Memento, The Prestige, Inception, Interstellar, Dunkirk, and The Dark Knight are all currently or will soon be timeless masterpieces. They also state that the only ones particularly close are Martin Scorsese, Quentin Tarantino, and Denis Villeneuve for this last 20 years. I just took this to this century. That's a lot easier than, 98 now, like 2000 and now is how I went with it. You have anything for this, I'm guessing?
No.
No? Okay.
I do not.
Okay.
But listening to his Nolan part there, Nolan sounds pretty good.
Yes. So I looked at 10. I looked at 13. So 3 honorable mentions go out to Ryan Johnson I just went and noted all their great films from the decade with Brick, The Brothers Bloom, Looper, and of course Last Jedi. Then honorable mention for Steven Spielberg for this decade, or this century, with his seminal works of the century being AI, Artificial Intelligence, Minority Report, Munich, and Bridge of Spies. To me, everything else from this decade has been pretty bad. Don't get me started on Ready Player One. We'll get into that on our best of the year list. That'll be fun. Actually, that's my honorable mentions. Okay. I couldn't read that I have honorable mention as an entry on my honorable mention list. All right.
Okay.
So the 10 I considered or ended up considering after going through all the ones I was like, okay, yeah, him, her, okay, cool. That ended up being the top 10 of the decade of the century so far, in no particular order. Paul Thomas Anderson, whose selected works would be Punch Drunk Love, There Will Be Blood, The Master, Inherent Vice, and Phantom Thread for this year, or for this century. The Coen brothers, whose selected works would be Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Great musical. The Man Who Wasn't There, No Country for Old Men, Burn After Reading, and Inside Llewyn Davis. Guy Madden, unconventional selection here, whose selected works would include Dracula, Pages from a Virgin's Diary, Cowards Bend the Knee, The Saddest Music in the World, Brand Upon the Brain, My Winnipeg, and Keyhole. Wes Anderson, whose selected works would be The Royal Tenenbaums, Fantastic Mr. Fox, Moonrise Kingdom, The Grand Budapest Hotel, and from earlier this year, Isle of Dogs. Guillermo del Toro, whose selected works would include The Devil's Backbone, Blade 2, Hellboy, Pan's Labyrinth, Hellboy 2, The Golden Army, Crimson Peak, and The Shape of Water.
Sounds pretty good.
Steven Soderbergh, whose selected works include Aaron Brockovich, Ocean's 11, Solaris, The Good German, The Informant, Contagion. You could make an argument for Magic Mike, potentially. Behind the Candelabra, Logan Lucky, and from earlier this year, Unsane. Quentin Tarantino, whose works would include Kill Bill, Volumes 1 and 2, Death Proof, Inglourious Bastards, Django Unchained, and The Hateful Eight. Martin Scorsese, whose works include Gangs of New York, The Departed, Shutter Island, The Wolf of Wall Street, and Silence. This century. Denis Villeneuve, whose works would include Polytechnique, Incendies, Prisoners, Enemy, Sicario, Arrival, and Blade Runner 2049. And of course, Chris Nolan, whose seminal works of the century would include Memento, Insomnia, Batman Begins, Prestige, The Dark Knight, Inception, Interstellar, and Dunkirk. So I came to the conclusion that, yeah, I would say it's I'd say a dead tie between Chris Nolan or PTA. Really up to personal taste. If you prefer, deep, insightful art house stuff, Paul Thomas Anderson's your dude. If you prefer your more standard films, but with a deep arty edge to them, but is not the forefront, you gotta go with Chris Nolan here. So I'd say it's one of them two so far. Obviously when Denis gets out his, apparently he's working on a new Dune adaptation. If that's great, then I could see Denis taking this title in a couple of years when his Dune adaptation comes out. Scorsese, unfortunately, just not enough great work. Granted, he did deliver to me maybe his best film of his entire career this century with Silence, or The Departed. You can make a case for either of those being his finest work. So Tarantino, just not, his best work was in the 90s. Spielberg, well past his best work at this point, although still some good stuff. Del Toro, it's mostly just been that his highs are incredibly high. Unfortunately, there's just not enough of incredible high things. Same thing with Wes Anderson. Like, he did do a couple duds, Life Aquatic is not great. Rian Johnson, just not enough work, really. 3 great films and then 1 pretty good so far. The Coen brothers, same issue, although they did deliver maybe the best movie of the century so far with No Country for Old Men, but nothing else near that level. PTA, we already went through. Soderbergh kind of gets the volume argument. I think on my count, Yeah, on my count, Nolan has 8, Denis has 7, Del Toro has 7, Soderbergh has 9 currently that I would consider great. If you want to count Magic Mike, if you want to make that argument, Soderbergh would be the only one with 10. Then Guy Madden is the weird indie guy here, and ultimately just not as great as some of this other stuff here, of course. But I would comfortably say it's either Nolan or PTA, at least right now. You know, we can revisit this in a year or 2 or 3 or 4, whenever. The answer might change, but that would be my conclusion right now.
Okay.
So that is it for this episode of Unspooled. Thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more great content like this. And if you happen to have any questions you would like to have answered, you know, feel free to email us at unspooledpodcast@gmail.com. And your questions might be featured in our second Q&A in a month or 2. We'll see. Depends on how frequent and the volume we get these questions at, of course. So that will do it for today. So until the next episode, goodbye.